Hey there, this is episode 3 of the Story to Record podcast. This is Eli Button speaking. I am here with Jesse Novincito, and today our guest is Richard McCallum. So we are going
Hello, everyone.
give him a call.
Let's do this.
Thanks again for being here, Jesse. Always
As
appreciate
always,
it.
Of course. I love being on.
We're giving it the ring now. Oh, I'm not hearing him currently. Richard, can you hear me? Hello, Richard, can you hear me? I can hear you. I was having seems like I'm having a little bit of technical difficulty on this end. Can you still hear me?
Yeah, fine.
Okay, wonderful. Well, thank
There
you
we
so
go.
much for being here with us, Richard. It's a pleasure to be able to get to speak with you today. How are you?
Good. How do I pronounce your first name?
Yeah, my name is Eli.
Eli.
Yep.
Okay.
Eli Button, and I'm here with Jesse Novincito.
Hello, Richard. How are you doing?
Very good. It's
Good.
a nice, beautiful day here. We haven't had any rain in months.
That's a blessing.
Typical California. Yeah.
Right.
Sure.
And when did you move from Colorado to California?
Well, there were a lot of side trips before I got to California, but we left Colorado in 1968.
Okay.
Oh,
Mm-hmm.
1968. Was there a major event that happened in that year, or were you just ready to make that move out west?
Well, the hippies all came over to Boulder during the summer of '67 and took over the whole town, which I loved, but my parents didn't.
nice.
And so they packed us up by February '68. We packed up and moved back to Virginia Beach.
Okay.
Virginia.
Oh, wow. And is that where you were born and raised?
No, I was born in Bridgeport, Connecticut.
Oh, Bridgeport. Okay, beautiful area,
Yeah.
right?
And then we lived in Virginia Beach for 6 years, from 55 to 60, and then moved out to Colorado from 60 to 68.
That's a lot of travel. So
Yeah.
was the draw for Colorado, did it have something to do with the outdoors, or was it career motivated?
The reason my father moved to Colorado was because God told him to do so in a prayer.
That's so interesting. We were just speaking with somebody, Patricia, who was our last guest, was just talking about how that was her motivation. She saw symbols that led her the fish, the symbol of the fish,
Yep.
and she followed it to Colorado. So that's really interesting.
Yeah, he got involved with a non-denominational church in Virginia Beach, and they were heavy into prayer, and they had prayer sessions, and he thought that he should move to Boulder, Colorado.
And so how old were you when you made it to Boulder?
About 9, just turning 10 years old.
Okay, so you were born in the 40s, and that puts you in
I was
the
born 1951.
1951. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So yes. Okay. So late 60s
Yeah.
currently. Wonderful. And I know, Richard, I really appreciate too the number of things that you sent over, the stories and everything that we got to read through. And it seems like you really experienced a lot in Boulder during your time here.
Yeah, I did. I did, because it was a changing 60s, And when I first got there, Kennedy had just become president. And then shortly after that, of course, we had the Cuban Missile Crisis, which affected Boulder big time because Rocky Flats was a nuclear fuel plant. So they expected to be bombed.
Oh, wow.
And
that's a lot of fear.
that's out by Golden,
Right.
Yep. The fields out there by
Yep.
Golden. And my dad got a job out there working as an electrician. And he used to tell us that they were told not to go near any of the ponds out on the property, and that the rabbits glowed at night
Oh, wow.
from the radiation leaks. But anyway, so Boulder thought that it was ground zero. and they started building the new homes that were all going up in what they call the suburbs, which was anything outside of the campus area and the downtown area.
Mm-hmm.
All the new housing. The suburb we moved into, which was called Baseline subdivision, I think now it's called Park East. But anyway, it didn't have bomb shelters. But the very next year, the homes opening up in Table Mesa and stuff were all built with bomb shelters.
Wow. I didn't know that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's really interesting.
So,
I mean, what? How did that influence your upbringing, Richard? Like, did you feel that fear during that Cuban Missile Crisis time?
And the story I sent you was about my my neighborhood friend, whose brother went off the deep end about it and was trying to build little bomb shelters of his own in the cattle fields. And then when it really hit the apex, and on the news, Walter Cronkite was on the news every night, and he showed pictures of California with people emptying out all the supplies from the grocery stores, the hardware stores, and headed up to the mountains to try to get away from targeted areas. Mm. So he took it off the deep end, and he hung himself at 14 years old.
Yeah.
The back of the drive-in.
Yeah, that's the story that resonated most heavily with me, I think. And I mean, what a shame too. At such a young age, it's apparent how much that I guess in general we could say media
about
influences.
10 or 11. He was about 14, so he's like 3 years older than me.
Yeah. Wow.
And then after that, a year later was Kennedy's assassination, and I was in Boulder at that time when I was in 7th grade when they announced it on the school intercom, and then we all went home, for the Thanksgiving break.
Wow. And
so Boulder was doing a lot of changing during the 60s.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you just named, one very personal major event, but also the assassination of Kennedy at that time definitely shocked everyone, right? The nation kind of took a hit.
And then Vietnam started up. And by 67, of course, the anti-war movement was strong. And Haight-Ashbury had its Summer of Love. And there was a rumor in Haight-Ashbury, or in California, that an asteroid was going to hit the world.
Oh, right.
Specifically California, I guess. And thousands of the young people that were living in Haight-Ashbury and California in general all decided that Boulder, Colorado was going to be a safe place. And so they started pouring into Boulder, and they took over the whole town and took over all the cabins up in the mountains and campgrounds and everything,
Wow.
Which I thought was great. I had a great time. My parents got more and more agitated with it all. And they decided by February to go back to Virginia, where they felt more culturally integrated, I guess.
Sure. Yeah, so that's an interesting thing as well, right? So your parents moved out this way based on a calling, a religious calling. And so obviously they highly value religion. Do you feel like that passed on to you when you were younger? Did that resonate with you, or were you, it sounds like you were more open to adventure in certain ways?
Yeah. As a youngster, when we first moved out there, I used to participate in their prayers and stuff, and we used to go to churches. But over the years, I lost interest in it.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. So I guess how did your relationship fare with your parents at the point where at that crossroads when you determined that religious, or I guess religion in general, may not be so interesting to you?
I think they kind of changed during their time in Colorado too, because they went out and they're expecting to get really involved with, crusade type work or evangelical, atmosphere. And they never did really find it in Boulder. So that was another reason they went back to Virginia. But after that, they kind of dropped out of the church groups as well.
Wow. Wow. So, I mean, and I know that I guess we know based on your stories that you've experienced a lot, and you certainly have quite the cast iron memory. So I'm.
I do. Everybody says if you lived in the '60s, you don't remember anything. If you remember the '60s, you didn't really participate. Well, I participated, but I still remember everything about it.
Well,
one of the fortunate few, I'd say.
Yeah.
Do you have?
Of course, don't ask me where my car keys are today, but I can tell you everything that happened.
Priorities. There's only so much space in the head. So from that time, you experienced a lot. You put yourself out there, tried a lot of new things. And do you feel like that willingness to be adventurous played into your life later?
Oh, yes. I've been to every state in most countries, not most countries in the world, but every state, all 50 of them, Canada, Mexico. And then I traveled a bit in Europe. I actually joined the Navy after college and was a photojournalist for the Navy. And we was sent all over doing that.
So with the photojournalism, Richard, is that something that you kept up on and continued to do after your tenure at the Navy?
No, the Navy actually sent me to USC Cinema School, and I got a graduate degree from there in cinema. And then I worked in Los Angeles and San Francisco for the next 30 years in multimedia film industry jobs.
Wow. Very good.
That's really interesting. What type of cinema did you have a favorite genre?
My favorite genre is historical fiction, but I never got into though I did write most of the stories that I'm writing today started off as screenplays that I tried to sell in Hollywood, but nobody ever bought them.
Well,
so now I'm turning them into little books and getting published with them. So it's been fun.
That's great. Yeah, maybe that opportunity, it'll take the book to inspire the cinema.
Movies are made from books anyhow, from actual books. So trying to just do screenplays and get people to read them and stuff, just didn't work for me.
That's really interesting. When you were in the Navy and you were responsible for doing this photojournalism work, what types of places did you end up?
They sent me to Sicily for 6 months, and then from there we traveled to Oman, France, South Middle East, Crete, and did tours into Germany. And, we would go off wherever there was a press release. They wanted a video press release. We would go and meet up with the Navy band, tour the Caribbean with the Navy band, do public relations events. And then military exercises like in Oman, off the coast of Saudi Arabia. And, the Marines would invade the beach and we'd videotape or film their conflict with the crabs on the beach. Because nobody was shooting at them, so they staged battles.
So they staged a fake battle with crabs. Am I hearing that?
It was really Hollywood, the only enemy out there was the crabs on the beach. But they did the whole thing, the whole fleet, aircraft carriers, helicopter carriers, marine assaults onto these beaches as a joint training exercises with the Omanians and the friendly forces over in that area.
Oh wow. That's really funny. I would have never guessed that they would practice a routine like that against crabs.
Well, I mentioned the crabs because I wrote a little memoir where they dropped us off in these helicopters, and we accidentally got in the wrong helicopter, and it dropped us off a mile from where the event was happening, and we had to walk down the coastline on the hard sand, find the hard sand because the other sand was too crusty. And we got to the beach line where we could walk on the sand easier, but there were these huge crabs moving in and out of it. That looked like if we tripped and fell, they'd have us eaten in seconds.
Wow. That's really interesting. Were you into photography as a hobby before joining the Navy, or did you learn it in the Navy?
Yeah, I went to Montana State for film and TV and photography. And when I graduated from there, then I joined the Navy.
Oh, okay. Wow.
Because I couldn't get National Geographic to hire me and send me around the world. So
I see. So it was a calculated move because you knew you would
The
get.
Navy
Yeah.
was the next best thing.
Right. All I wanted to do was travel and make movies and shoot pictures and stuff. And nobody offered me the position. And I was like, well, dang it, I'll make it happen.
Oh, yeah. Chase your dreams, right?
Yeah. It turned out real good. I had a real nice time, even though I was anti-military, basically as a kid. But, I enjoyed my 6 years there, and then they sent me to 2 of those 6 years was more or less in USC in LA as an outsourced civilian and going to the graduate school. So they paid for it, so it was great.
Wow.
So, Richard, real quick, I want to ask, while you were in the Navy, what was a favorite country of yours and why?
Well, I really love Sicily. They sent us. I lived there with my wife for 6 months. We went over there. First wife, I should say. I just got reminded by my second wife to say first wife.
Good disclaimer.
And so from there, in between assignments for the Navy, we explored Sicily and Italy and Europe and stuff. So Sicily was a great place to go.
Very good. Okay.
Sounds lovely. I mean, from what I've heard of it, I guess in general.
And we lived off base in a little, Italian village called Moda at the base of the volcano.
Oh wow.
Okay. I hear the soil is very good for farming and planting crops and things like that with volcanic soil.
Yeah, they have what they call the blood oranges grow there.
Oh,
and lots of vineyards, of course, and very great agricultural area.
Nice. Very good.
Richard, you were interested in cinema for a very long time. Was there ever a point in time where you felt burnt out or not interested in it anymore?
Well, I ended up working, as they call the film industry, which is behind the scenes, post-production, post-production, behind the scenes.
Sure.
And so, I worked my way up to be manager at some major post-production facilities and then sales. But I didn't really break into making the movies I would have liked to. But
still like in that same facet, in the same area, so you were able to use, I guess it certainly sounds like a passion. If the goal was to travel the world and record these videos or capture this film, at least you landed
LA,
something.
As I say, it's an industry, so everybody, there's a very select few that actually get out there and actually make, like writer, director, cinematographer, editor. Those are kind of the above line jobs that are only temporary in nature. So if you're trying to have a home and family, they're very hard to succeed in those temporary jobs that are, they only use it for a day or two here or there, or a couple weeks here to do this or that. It is not a steady employment.
Right. It's generally contract work.
And also they're union. So there's all those issues that they don't tell you about in film school,
Yeah, I actually was not aware of that. I didn't know that either.
Yeah, it's very unionized in Hollywood. You have to be a union cameraman, you have to be a union editor. And to get into the union is pretty difficult.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so you chose a rewarding yet difficult career.
Yeah, it was a little less glamorous. I was hoping all the time to keep writing and sell somebody my stories and make them into a movie, but it just didn't happen that way.
Hmm. Well, and it's interesting. I'm not sure how much you're still into the making and the processes, but you can really do these things on your own
Nowadays.
now.
Yeah, nowadays, right. Yeah, I know. And who knows? Well, it's always a possibility.
Yeah. Do you feel like you've networked to a point where you have connections of other people in the industry
Not
who could help?
really. I'm more of a writer, so I'm not really good at networking, which is probably a weakness, but I don't get out and socialize much.
Sure. Well, and knowing your strengths is a good thing too. So,
Yeah.
In your years, Richard, I'm curious if there's anything that really stands out as far as advice that you would want to pass along.
I guess, the more involved you are, like you just said, networking. I tried some, but, I know other people, like I work with editors that as soon as they put their film editing machine and rewind, while it was rewinding, they would get on the phone and start asking for the next job. You know what I mean?
Oh, sure.
So you really have to hustle all the time in that industry. So yeah, networking is great, but it just wasn't my forte, I guess.
Well, outside of career-wise, is there anything else that really stands out to you that, I guess, general advice?
Live long and be prosperous.
Fair enough. Fair enough. A little Star Trek.
Yeah.
Good. What are you most proud of, Richard?
Well, now I'm proud of my writing and my second wife and my son, who just became a California bar lawyer.
Wow, congrats.
Congratulations.
Yeah. But my writing's starting to produce. I've been published 3 or 4 times now and still working on getting it out there. In fact, this afternoon we're having a Zoom meeting with the California Writers Club, and I'm going to read a part of my latest story.
That's
on
right.
COVID-19.
That's right. I know you gave us a little snippet, but it doesn't have to be the COVID-19 story. But which story that you've written is your favorite, and why?
The favorite story, which I have a short version, and then I have a long novel, is The Salvation of Angelo Raguel, if I say it right. And it's a speculative historical fiction about a celebrity lawyer who has an afterlife experience and then falls into the arms of Satan and is given a tour of the universe from the Big Bang till today.
Interesting.
Wow.
And I mean, that's obviously has some religion in it. So where did you pull that from?
I guess my background, and my parents in early studies of reading the Bible, stuff, Old Testament, New Testament, that kind of thing. But a lot of research.
Yeah. It sounds like it's all things that are applicable to your past.
It's not a religious story, though. It's more like, are you aware of Anne Rice?
Yes. Yep.
So it's more like one of her stories.
Okay. Very neat.
It's not a religious story.
Well, I would love to. Is that one printed and published?
It's not published, but I'm trying to get it. I have a publisher reading it currently.
Great.
Of course, she's been reading it for a long time. It's 300,000 words. So
Oh, wow. Wow.
it's complex.
You handed over a long one.
Yeah.
But you have a shorter version of it?
I have a shorter version of it that's only about 5 or 6 pages.
Oh.
Or a couple chapters kind of thing,
Interesting. That's neat. Have you ever, do you ever read these?
That was published. The short version was published.
Oh, okay.
In fact, it was just published, and it's part of the pandemic anthology published by the High Desert California Writers Group. It's on Amazon, along with my moose story. So I got 2 stories published in one anthology just last month.
Wow.
And it's on Amazon. Pandemic.
That's great. That's really great. And I mean, if the short one's published, then hopefully the long one will follow soon. But it sounds like you put a lot of energy and effort into it.
Well, that's what I did in all my career in Hollywood and San Francisco. I had a daytime job, working in the industry, management and sales. And then at nights and weekends, I'd write.
Wow.
So and that's why I didn't get out much for networking. Sure. Right.
And I guess you may have answered this by saying that you're not very outgoing, right? But do you ever read these stories live?
I do.
Oh, wonderful.
As part of the California Writers Club.
Oh, right.
Which there's multiple branches in California. We do a lot of that read aloud at the events, and now that we're all locked in, they're doing a lot of Zoom readings.
That's right. So are people who attend generally folks who are reading stories as well, or are there people just interested in? Okay.
No, they're writers of the club.
Gotcha.
And also the San Mateo Library is now publishing our videos.
Oh, wow. Interesting.
So,
and the videos of the Zoom meeting storytelling?
Well, sort of. No, well, I mean, for the San Mateo Library, we record our own video of our reading aloud.
Oh,
and
okay.
Then we send it into the library.
Gotcha. Wow, very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like a really good resource to get your name out there. Do you ever get contacted by people locally, you think, who are finding your stories that way?
Not so much, no.
Okay. Well, soon.
And I've been trying to sell it, or lure people in to purchasing, a downloadable PDF of the story using my website and some Facebook visits pages and stuff.
Oh, good.
And I get a lot of downloads. The sample I send out. I don't give them the whole thing, but I haven't found much response of people actually asking for the whole story to be sent to them. So.
Yeah, that's business, right? Very difficult to maneuver.
So you have to move into being your own publisher,
right?
And that's kind of difficult.
Yeah, I mean, nowadays, instead of handing it off and taking a percentage and allowing other people to get involved and push things for you, it's really that route is almost not an option anymore. But then it forces you to become the writer, the publisher, the editor, the marketer, the advertiser, all of these things.
I did get an offer for publication from Austin McCallum, pretty big publisher.
Yeah, I think I've heard that.
But the way they want to structure the contracts now is they call the participation contract, where they say that they're going to get it out there for you, but they want to charge you for any services that are needed to get it out there. So like if you do a book cover, they want you to pay for that. And if you do any kind of, if they need an editor to read your story or something, then you have to pay for that. And so they added up fees, came to about maybe up to $5,000.
Wow.
That I would have to pay for them to publish the story.
Wow.
So I backed out
it's a
of
little
that.
bit of a gamble for you.
Yeah, but I did send it to a lawyer. I mean, it's a legitimate contract. It's a legitimate offer. It's just that the way publishers are heading now is they're not getting the money they want, and they're trying to make the writer participate in the cost for publication.
Right. And that publication, does that involve distribution at all?
Yeah, they take care of the distribution,
Okay.
but the distribution is such a small part of it. I put a story up on Amazon.com through CreateSpace years ago, and the distribution was great. I mean, worldwide, eBay, Amazon, everybody carries this book. But how do you get people to find it, and how do you get people to buy it? And then from there, even with CreateSpace and Amazon, you only get 25% of the sale cost, which is like for $10 book, you get $2.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that's tough when it's just the platform as well. So it's not really even marketing. It's just a placeholder, right?
Right.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the nice thing is it makes it simpler for anybody to put their creative work out. But at the same time,
yeah,
I guess
that's a little dangerous too, because
True.
then you have people putting out stuff that haven't gone through an editor or haven't gone through any kind of review, and you're going to spend $10 to download a book that you may not like. It doesn't have any recommendations or reviews to it.
Yeah, that's a good point too. I guess the risk of there being a book like that or a story like that that's not edited or however, just not written well, can dampen the customer's view of storytelling or their desire to look into more. So,
right.
Yeah.
So, and the one thing, about self-publishing is you never feel like you've been validated. At least with my stories appearing in actual books that are on sale, on Amazon or being published by other people, I feel like my story is being validated. It's not just me throwing out something.
Sure, yeah, and it takes on a different thing.
It's selective, because it's a contest. You submit to these clubs, and they read the submissions, and then they only pick 20 out of 300 or so to go to publication. So that when they pick your story, you feel like people have read it and judged it to be worth their while to read it and to represent their club or their group,
right,
as a quality writer.
But it doesn't sound like it affects your perspective on your own writing and whether it's good or not, right? It's not all based on other opinions. It does validate me. I think, how do I know what I do is good unless somebody tells me it's good? You know what I mean? Sure.
So I may be thrilled to death with what I write. I have a reader. In fact, I have an editor who reads everything I write over and over again. I do endless rewrites. But before we finally get to something that I could submit to a contest or publication.
Sure. So really at this point, it seems like self-publishing and distributing your book on your own, your stories on your own, really that marker, that validation comes back in form of possibly positive customer reviews or an excess of sales, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. So it's just a little further down the line. Yeah. But still obtainable.
I like to know that other people enjoy the work before I publish it. But the whole point of publishing it is to get people to pay you for what you do.
Right.
and it's great to be published like I am in these anthologies, but I don't get any of the royalties for the sales of the anthologies. It goes back to the clubs.
Yeah, something that I've found in my very short experience in the business world anyway is it seemed to help for me is giving away things for free. and then still selling other things. But it seems to, maybe that's just a 2020 factor, but at least to get that interest for somebody who would be willing to pay for it once they get that sample for free.
Well, that's what I try to. I'm offering the samples for all my stories on my website.
Okay.
I offer a page or two or whatever.
Yeah.
But then I leave it off and say, okay, you read this far. If you want to read further, just send me an email. I'll send you the whole thing. And then during that email, I would suggest they make a contribution, donation. They don't have to actually buy it. But I suggest they leave a review, or I kind of make that kind of like an obligation. Well, minimally, I'd like you to leave a positive statement on the website if you like it. And if you liked it enough and you feel like you'd like to make a donation, then you can do that also. That way I don't have to get involved with actual listing a sales price for each read, and I don't have to run it as a return book. But I don't like this book, return it, or any of that kind of mess.
Yeah, I could see how that would muddy things.
Haven't worked yet, but that's what my intent is.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, and I can't say that I know the perfect situation or way to do it either. But yeah, if people are reaching out and people are at least reading it and giving it a chance, that's wonderful. Right. I mean, it's without having that publisher, that's more than you could have done a few decades ago. Or definitely. Oh yeah, it's great. Personal.
And of course, then there's Grammarly that helps me make sure I got all the dots in the right places.
Right. So, like, how much? Obviously, technology has changed so much in your lifetime, but even with a lot of the equipment that you would be using for some of your career path or your hobbies, writing, filming, how much did you have to adapt and overcome during your career? And then also, do you feel like it's helped?
Well, yes. During my career, I went from, motion picture film, celluloid, and having to cut it and glue it together and, and take pictures and develop them and print them out to, now electronic digital deliveries and incredible changes. And that's what my job was for the last 30 years in the motion picture or film and multimedia industries, was to keep up with all those technology changes and keep the companies profitable as they went from film to 1-inch tape to digital tapes to flash drives to all that. The first digital editing machines came out when I was with Lorimar Studios, and they made the big switch to not cut the negative, the original camera negative. They decided not to cut that and just transfer it directly to video. And that's why episodes of Dallas were not distributed in France as those series later on, because the French refused to take a 1-inch videotape as the original source. They wanted to cut 35 millimeter camera regional negative, and that decision was made by the VP at the time not to do that route. So then it suffered later when people decided 1-inch video wasn't broadcast quality.
Interesting.
Or good enough to transfer and stuff.
Was there, I mean, obviously, if your job was to keep these companies on the up and up in regards to what's current and what's coming, was there ever a point where you resisted that change, or were you always interested in the change?
I was always interested, but it probably overwhelmed me when I was in my late 50s, like about 10 years ago when I retired from the multimedia companies. Just, what we eventually evolved to was the commercials. At the time, I was working for a commercial delivery company, and they were bypassing doing duplication of the commercials, which, you know, we had to put out hundreds of thousands of 30-second spots, and you had to mail them out, FedEx them every night to get them to the stations on time for play. So when they moved away from shipping and into the online video distribution of the commercials to the TV stations, that cut into the need for management that I was providing at that company.
Oh, interesting. So it was like a phasing out of the position?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I grew out of it. They didn't need me to oversee the distribution of the commercials at that point.
Interesting.
They would just send them over to somewhere in Texas that would, you know, download them and take care of the distribution there.
Yeah. I mean, even in the last 10 years, I mean, how long have you been out of the industry?
Well, I worked in the multimedia industry was about 10 years ago.
Okay, yeah. So even in this last decade, there's just been, in the last year, there have been massive changes with equipment, things like that.
Exactly.
Yeah, I would imagine
But it started way back, you know, by 1980, when the computers first started coming out. I mean, everything started changing right away.
Wow.
Avid editing systems came out, you know, and the studios and the unions were reluctant to change, and old editors couldn't find jobs. And, you know, it went on for a long time.
Yeah, I bet the cost to produce a movie now is way less.
Oh, yeah, way less, yeah.
Yeah.
Especially now they're not even doing theatrical runs anymore. They're just releasing directly to cable. So,
right.
You know, that's going to affect all the movie houses. The ones here in my area try to upgrade with lounge chairs and wine and beer and food, you know.
Right.
But now they're all closed down because of COVID anyhow. So.
Yeah, that's a tough one. And I mean, I think for a lot of people, unfortunately, that the shooting that happened in Aurora, Colorado during a Batman movie, I think that movie viewing in public in general took a huge decline after that.
And that was so costly, you know, they only want like $20, $30 a ticket.
Right, yeah.
Plus, if you're going to go in there and drink wine at $10 a glass.
Well, and it's one of those things where it used to be less expensive and more people went, and for whatever reason, now that less people are going.
You know, you can't take a family to the movie today. It's too expensive. The popcorn's what, $10 for a bag of popcorn?
Yeah, it's not the best way for a business to break even, that's for certain.
You end up spending about $100 for an entire family.
Yeah. And
we used to go with the drive and sneak in the trunk with kids, you know, and put our sleeping bags out on the speakers in the front row and watch the movie.
Drive-ins were fantastic. They're actually becoming, they're getting a little bit of a bump.
I heard they're trying to bring them back to COVID.
Yeah. There's been stand-up comedians and musicians performing at drive-ins lately. I guess that people become creative when there's no other option. So, yeah. I always love the drive-in.
There's even some movies. I don't know. Maybe the correct terminology, but producers or things like that are actually just turning, instead of releasing directly to theaters, they're actually just releasing to movie channels like HBO. HBO Max is becoming a thing where subscription-based viewing is more prominent, and movies are coming out right to them.
I would be surprised to know that they could project a digital image large enough to put onto a drive-in screen these days, but maybe so. I mean, I know they wouldn't want to go back to 35 millimeter film.
Right.
So if you were actually going to try to project a movie at a drive-in theater, with a digital projector, maybe they can do it. I don't know.
Yeah,
I'm sure they can,
yeah.
but
Probably, right. Technology is amazing, but at the same time, I guess as somebody who does a little bit of videography myself, and as I'm sure you know, that stretching in the resolution can certainly cause a lot of sacrifice in
right.
pixel quality
Right.
or grain, noise, things like that. So, yeah,
I mean, they'd have to hook a huge cable between the projector and the screen.
Yeah, but it's I suppose it's possible, and maybe it's still a better option.
Satellite, maybe satellite. I guess they could do it. But...
Yeah, possibly. I guess I just it's been a long time for me. It's been over a decade since I've been to a drive-in, so I would.
Right.
I would go though. It's one of those things where it's more about the experience probably than the actual quality on the screen.
Like I said, one of my stories is that I worked for Samuel Zarkov in Los Angeles. I did an internship with him, and he was the one who made all the drive-in movies back in the '60s.
Oh wow!
The Blob, and all the teenage horror movies.
So those were made for drive-in?
Yeah, they call them drive-in movies.
Interesting. Okay.
And he specialized it, and in his final days, he was like, well, as long as teenagers are interested in sex, there'll be a need for drive-in movie theaters. Oh. But what he didn't envision was that families would evolve where the kids can stay at their parents' house and do whatever they want. So, it's like back then it was a way for kids to get out of the house, go on dates, and have romance.
Yeah.
Nowadays kids, can just stay at home and their parents like, okay, yeah, go ahead.
Well, and I mean, I know we touched on it already, but that influence of technology has really changed everything in that regard too.
Yeah.
Everything's different. Yeah. What was it like getting your first cell phone?
Well, I have to remember. They were big.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
They weren't small. And I don't know. I guess one of the first around with a phone in our house without a cord, they were just like regular phone, except they were cordless.
Right.
Phones. Mm-hmm. And the first cell phone, I was an old-fashioned flip phone guy forever. In fact, this was my first cell phone non-flip phone that I've ever had is the one I have now that I've had a year or two. Because I was working a lot, so I always had a flip phone because I could just strap it to my belt and have it available.
Smart.
So I mean, they were cell phones, but they were little flip phones, which I hear are making a comeback.
Yeah, I think they are.
Yep.
At least you couldn't do butt calls with them.
Very true. Yeah. Do you feel like, what do you feel like was more intrusive for you in a work situation with boundaries? Do you feel like having a cell phone or email, intruded in your privacy as far as like being able to relax after work?
Well, only if I make the mistake of triggering telemarketers, like I might look up something on the internet like Medicare and make a stupid decision to put in my name and phone number. And then, for the next 2 weeks, you get bombarded with telemarketer calls. But other than that, I'm not that social of a person, so I don't get a lot of calls.
Sure. I guess I just meant before cell phones were popular, you would go to work and then you would leave work and go home, and maybe they'd catch you on your home phone.
I guess, as far as like my wife goes, in the past when we had just a phone at home, she doesn't even remember now how she could stand to, deal with not being able to call me if something happened, like, a car accident, something at work. tell me to go pick up something on the way home. We didn't have phones.
Yeah, I mean, there's
Almost
definitely benefits to it, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, now I see kids in the front seat of the car texting the kid in the back seat of the car.
Yeah, that definitely exists, and it's grown.
There's the drawbacks, right?
Yeah. That's grown in popularity.
You're sitting in the front, she's in the back. Why are you texting each other?
Right. Unfortunately, it's difficult to separate kids nowadays from their electronic devices.
Right.
Yeah, it's turned from a privilege to a right in a way.
But, like you said, I mean, it's opening up lots of opportunities at a lot less cost and a lot less. I mean, to make a movie back in those days, or even today, but I mean, back in those days with all the unions and crews and catering trucks and, huge amount of people. Mm-hmm. And, the collaboration between everybody, the writer, the director, the cameraman, the editor, all that took a lot of interaction. But, and I imagine there's some phones are ringing all day long. But, now you could probably do pretty good just by yourself or with collaborating with just a few people.
Yeah, you're right. And that's, I mean, I guess that's one of the motivators for Story to Record in general. And I guess even this podcast is I wouldn't have been able to do this 5 years ago, but 10 years ago, definitely not, at least with such ease to be able to organize a phone call with you, Richard, and you're in California and I'm in Colorado and Jesse's in Carolina. One of those over there, but we're just able to do this so easily, right? Yeah. So it in a way, if you're motivated, you can make those.
You haven't really told me much about what you're doing and what your plans for these podcasts are.
Sure, yeah. So in general, like what Story to Record is, we record life stories, and we do that with a video production team, and we'll set up at the...
Oh, that's right. I remember.
Yeah. So that's the recording life stories in a video format like that, or partnering with assisted living or hospice communities to record life stories is really our main goal. And with COVID and that's influence on our ability to connect with people in that way, we decided to launch this podcast as a way to still kind of do that, but in a simpler way that's free for whoever. And just, the mission is just to record life stories. And if we're able to do that this way, that's great.
Yeah. I did it with my parents. My father has always had a little 8mm camera with him when he was growing up, or teenager anyhow, and early family years. So we could have lots of family films and also photographs. So I got them all transferred years ago. And when my parents were still alive, and then because the films were silent movies, black and white silent movies, I projected those in the living room onto the screen and then recorded with the video camera my parents narrating over top of the black and white films. Oh, wow. So then they could say, that's Aunt Dottie, she's with Jerry, and we're in Bridgeport, and blah, blah,
Wow.
So they talked all the way through the black and white silent movies.
Yeah.
So now I have the movies with their audio over top of it.
Yeah.
And then I sat them down on the couch and just videotaped an interview, just like you're doing with me, and interviewed them on their history, from early days to today. And they were very animated. They did a great job. And then I compiled all the slides and pictures. I think there was 3,000 of them, and put them all into a file. And in order to organize them, I just did it by decade, because it was like too many to try to ID each one of them. So I just did like 1940s, 1950s, 1960s, 1970s. So then you have, 500 in each category or whatever.
Wow.
And so that I collected that together, and then I did my family history, and I'm still working on that. I'm working on the family history story. So
that's so great. The idea too of having them narrate those family videos for context is such a wonderful thought, and the fact that you've used your skill. And I tell friends and folks who have the skills to do videography, to create these videos, I urge them to do them for their parents. So what do you think it was that you found importance in making sure that you had this content recorded?
At the time I bought a Hewlett Packard computer with Final Cut, I think I used Final Cut. But anyway, the computer made everything so much easier than it could have ever been. Once I had the computer and could transfer the files and edit them and integrate the photographs and the audio and all that. I mean, it took years, but without that computer and the technology breaking out 10 years ago when I was doing that, I couldn't have done it. I would still be stacks of pictures and stacks of videos.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a lot to go through.
Like you, I'm publishing stories, but I'm not making any money. And I considered over the years doing what you're offering, and I know other people tried. In fact, I was in sales for years, trying to get people to do their life stories, that kind of thing, and never had any success because when you sit down and you start calculating the hours you're going to spend trying to put it together for them, trying to get any kind, minimum wage would be hard to get because, you could spend so many hours on a photograph. One photograph
right.
Can cause you trouble, or you want this view, or you want to integrate this photograph, or different formatting to it. And, it's very tedious hourly labor to put all these things together and to try to charge a client enough to cover your costs, even your most basic costs, is very difficult.
Yeah, I appreciate that you have the experience to understand that, and it really does kind of disqualify, unfortunately, a lot of potential people from being able to afford the service just because, like you said, it does take a really long time to put them together. But
my wife just used Legendary, the system, sent her videos and photos to Legacy. They advertise all the time, a little box. You send in everything you have, and they put it onto a flash drive for you. So that cost her about $500 for what she had. Yeah. But she did. There were some. Now she's looking at the files. She's seeing lots of them that she didn't want. Movies of TV shows or something like that. She didn't know what was on the videos that she sent in. They were just family videos. So then, you end up with all this 50 hours worth of stuff that they put on the flash drive for you, which is nice, but you still have endless amounts of stuff that was just family stuff that you don't maybe want to see. And I I had to go through and edit all my parents' stuff down to relevant, stuff. Because we'd be on drives and just the camera would roll for minutes or whatever. So to take on that whole project and try to edit it down and put the photographs in and put in narration and present it on videos, which I did. I've done it all. But to try to charge for that would be very difficult.
Yeah.
Right.
And I guess what I try to do is make it as straightforward and as simple as possible so that it's still a life story, but perhaps doesn't take my years to put them together. But I think the ultimate thing, and really for purchasing anything, you have to feel like you need it. Or to have expendable funds to the point where if you want it, it's not an issue. But I think it helps. It helps for me because I lost my mother, and I know how much I wish I had a video like this of her. So I can understand the value in that way, and it's really just helping others understand it. And what I've found is a lot of folks who have lost a parent or have lost a spouse do understand the value. So it's trying to bridge that gap.
I started my own family history group on Facebook, and I've located some 200 plus extended relatives that we had never known about.
Wow.
Over the years. And I posted my videos on that group, and the ones who watch it love it. You know, just like, oh, that's so precious gold that you have videos of your parents and the old family films with them talking over them, explaining who the people are and what they do. You know, they love it. But in general, I'd say out of the 200 people that are in the group and have access to these videos, I'd say maybe a dozen have, you know, actually watched a little bit of them. So, I mean, they're great and it's a treasure, but it's hard to interest people enough to really, you know, pay attention to it.
Yeah, and I guess it depends, and it could be just our culture and our values in this culture and the social media's influence on what's interesting and devaluing older adults in a certain way. There are a lot of unfortunate things that could factor into it, but I think what's most important probably is that your children and grandchildren, great-grandchildren.
Oh, yeah, I'm sold. I did it.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying,
it was great for me. It was great for my family. And it's great for, you know, quite a few people that, you know, have children. They can show their grandparents at young people doing stuff and everything. Yeah. And it's great. But I'm just saying, if I try to charge people, say, oh, you want to watch this video? Can you send me $100? It's already put together. Do you want? Can you pay me $100 to watch the video? No, I probably wouldn't.
Oh yeah, no, I would never want to do it that way. Certainly, no. The cost is up front, and then you share the video as you wish. But yeah, I mean, you get it. You've done it. Your lineage will get that video of your parents narrating, and it's just a priceless piece of history that you couldn't have of your great-grandparent. So yeah, but anyhow, Richard, I know that we've reached over an hour, and I've had a great time speaking with you, and I would love for us to do this again. So if you're interested in that, I will happily reach out soon to schedule another time. Is that something you would be willing to do?
Sure. And maybe if we do a little Zoom, I can show you some of the videos I have on my Facebook.
Okay.
It's a private group, but I could, you know, over my shoulder a little bit, you know, play some parts of it. You can see what I'm talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. We could arrange that for next time.
All right.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Richard. It was a real pleasure.
All right. Very interesting. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Richard. We really appreciate it.
Bye. All right. That was Richard McCallum. Jesse, thank you so much for chatting with us.
Yes, sir. Pleasure to be on.
Well, we will just plan to see you all next time. I hope you enjoyed that chat, and obviously we'll be arranging another time for us to speak with Richard again, but always interesting to learn new perspectives, to hear about other people's experiences, where they've been, and I guess how far they've come. So yeah, thank you all for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.